to the Torbay Business Forum first ever virtual breakfast. Who'd have thought this when we met back in March, when I said this could be the last mass gathering we'll see for a while? Who knew it would turn to this? So a big thank you to Emily Tucker at South Devon College for providing the tech today. And of course, we have Laurence Frewin, the CEO and Principal of South Devon College here in a moment as panel member. I have to say, we're a couple of minutes late because it's been a big learning curve. We've got 8 people on the panel. It's going to be interesting as we all get our new screen and sound etiquette. Now, before I go any further, I must take a moment to pause for thought and pass on a massive get well soon to our Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Our thoughts and wishes go out to Boris and his family at this really worrying time. But I know, Boris, you can pull through. So thanks to that. Now, where are we? For those that don't know, the Torbay Business Forum is designed to bring businesses together. If we can do that without too much heavy breathing in the background, it'll be really useful. We are missing our breakfast today. I hope you've had a good one at home. Missing Simon and the team at the Riviera Centre. I hope that everyone there is well and safe. The situation has really unfolded at pace, and it's no wonder that people are concerned. They're worried about what's going on. You could say we're getting media overload, but it's about knowing what's happening locally. And so we pulled together today a panel of local people who can tell us what the front line really is looking like and what it looks like from the southwest region. It's a bizarre change, but now is the time to come together and use this to build our network and share our knowledge for what actually now, for many of us now, is the new normal. And it'll be interesting to see when we come out of this, how things then develop and the learns we can take. We're going to call in our participants. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Tim Jones, who is the chair of the Southwest Business Council. There will be a chance to ask questions. If you can, you as a participant can ask a question. We'll do our best to field those. And if we don't have time today to answer them, we'll do our best to come up with a frequently asked questions and answer paper later on. So without further ado, we've got a tight timescale, so let's hand over to Tim Jones.
Thanks, Steve. This is really unusual for me to have to be almost entirely negative. I'm probably the most optimistic person. I can always find that little bright spot, but at the moment, the news is unabashedly bad. The latest predictions really just push all the records off the scale. If you go back to 2008, the GDP dropped 6%. If you go to the Great Depression in the 1930s, it dropped 8%. The current prediction is that for Q2, it will drop 31%, and that interprets to a financial loss of £2.4 billion a day. Now, we can do without that sort of bad news, so trying to find where the positives are is something that we've been striving really hard for. The government have pitched in with a very impressive package of support measures. A lot of that they're having to do on the hoof. They're reinventing a lot of systems that are now in place, and we've now heard that the government have funded local authorities to pay out the first round of support, which will be the business rate relief and the 10 grand support for small businesses. So that should be in the system in the next couple of weeks. The major concern we've got is when the funding system will provide the wherewithal to provide the furlough package. Until that is in place, then a lot of businesses are having to fund their employees at whatever level. Most are adopting the 80% rule for that. The concern there is that it might drift on for another 2 or 3 weeks, and that, of course, means that there's a huge cash burn for a lot of businesses. The absolute priority at the moment is just to hang on, however difficult that might sound. make sure that the furlough package kicks in, and then it's fingers crossed to make sure that furlough means that at the end of the furloughing period, and we don't know when that will be yet, currently it's the 3 months from the 1st of March onwards, that there will be another package in place by the government, or that we will begin to see the signs of a recovery. In order to bridge the gap, the funding gap, there are a number of interventions in place, VAT payment being one of those. The VAT quarter payment has been suspended with no interest penalty, and the grant system, that funding should be coming through any time in the next week to 10 days. In addition to that, we've been talking to the banks about the rescue package they've made available, elegantly called the CBILS program, CBILS program, which is for small companies. This is for loans up to £500,000 each. The first £250,000 of that should be a relatively soft loan with no personal guarantees from business owners, but in fairness to the banks, they are having a tenfold increase in the number of inquiries that they've got at the moment for processing. That proves to be extremely difficult, just respecting the fact that they've got staff down and they're having to safeguard as well. So trying to catch up quickly with their program is something that is proving to be particularly difficult. The pace has really sped up, though. In the last 24 hours, the government have made some adjustments to the way in which the bank funding packages are constructed, and that's been helpful in terms of balance sheets. But still, the view from the banks is that credit committees cannot just arbitrarily make new funding loans available. They need to be absolutely clear on what the future health of the business will be. So there's no easy fix in terms of the bank funding package, but that discussion will be ongoing. Certainly, the bank managers that we've been talking to, the regional bank managers in the last 24 hours, have said that any direct impact that is being suffered by businesses managing to support the staff until the furloughing program comes in would be a qualifying criteria for that package. So there's a little bit more help expected there. That's a very brief summary of an awful lot of facts that we're assimilating at the moment. Devon has suffered disproportionately badly in terms of the number of business failures that's already taken place. Flybe being a classic example of that, 2,000 jobs there. We've been red flagged by government, which is not something we're very proud of, but it does mean that we will qualify for additional support and information that I get, and it's absolutely crucial that we've got really good raw data about what's happening in the marketplace, which is why some feedback from all of you guys will be really helpful. Goes straight into a team in the centre, and we will hope as a result of that, that we will get additional support because of the particular circumstances that Devon finds itself in at the moment. So I stop there, Steve. Is that enough to get the discussion going?
Tim, that's fantastic. Yes, you've covered the drop in GDP. The word depression came into that. Furlough payments, delays in getting cash to businesses. And of course, you brought in the big thing about CBILS, which is obviously close to my heart, being in the banking sector, and we do understand what is needed and what has to be done. It's just difficult to get at it. You can stand on a dispatch box and announce to the nation this is going to happen. You then have to actually deliver. So that's great, Tim. Thank you very much for doing that. Could I bring in now Councillor Steve Darling to tell us about the Torbay Council's role, please?
Thank you. And I just wanted to say we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much. I often sit on similar things to this with ministerial briefings, and it's often 10 or 15 minutes late. So I think we can forgive ourselves that couple of minutes. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to all those who are pitching in and supporting, people across our communities, but also to our staff at Torbay and other core services that we've got in our community, where people really are going above and beyond what we'd normally expect them to do. But just to focus on the council, what we've done, we've reviewed what services we have and said what are the critical services? What do we need to do to make sure that we're keeping the bins being emptied on time, ensuring that that we've got that we're safeguarding those who are most vulnerable in our communities. So making sure that we're visiting those children who are at risk, because quite often you will find that being at school is.
Can I just pause you there? Sorry.
Yeah.
I do apologise. In the background, there's some movement by a microphone. So if I could just ask panelists on hold to mute, please. Thank you. Sorry, Steve, carry on.
Yeah, thank you. So it's making sure that we're supporting those who are most vulnerable in our community, like children, and making sure that we've got regular visits to those. So that's our core activity. And again, the new activity for us that's come up is that shielding, helping out with that 1.5 million across the country, which in Torbay translates to 2,600 people, where we've got we initially had a list of 150, then 400, then by last Thursday it was 2,600. So we're making good progress in respect of contacting all of those people and ensuring that we've got a clear way of what support needs they require, whether it's medicine or foods coming into them. In theory, there should be, if they've been in touch with the centre, that should already be underway, a level of support with food, and also we're attempting to do a 3 daily call back to those people, and we've had some real positive feedback from those people in need, that they felt really pleased that they know that there is somebody watching over them, and so we've had to redeploy staff to that service. But also the Torbay Development Trust, we've been in a position to deploy staff to help with vetting volunteers and help with manning the phones there, because clearly, whilst there's this government shielding list, there is also another large group of people out there who don't have these underlying health issues that the shielding list have, but equally because of their age ought to be staying in. And I'm just really worried about numbers of older folk who need to be protecting themselves by staying in for that 12 weeks. A key priority of ours as well is making sure that these grants of £10,000 and £25,000 are getting out the door as quickly as possible from the local authority that the government gave us the money to do that last week. So we needed a software patch, as a number of other local authorities needed, to be able to process them. That's now in place, and we are getting these out the door this week. We hope to get that out over the next 2 weeks, but we've got about 1,900 applications in. We think there should be about 2,500 to 3,000 that should be coming in. So please do get on and get your application in if you haven't already. The final one I wanted to talk about, what we've been doing as a council, is working in partnership with the new Torbay Weekly and getting that out, thanks to Jim, to 65,000 households, a special edition that is packed with useful information for all of our communities of what's it about, how can you get help, and we're seeing that as a trusted source. We're really concerned that a lot of older folk across Torbay may not have access to the internet. Everybody clearly on this call is relatively internet savvy, and so that was plugging that gap, and we're pleased that Jim was able to help us achieve that. And then finally, there's a number I'd just like to share, which is 207-201, which is our COVID-19 hotline at the council. It's manned 7 days a week, and so it is there at the weekends as well if people need support. It's primarily for the community, but also if you get through to it, we'll do our level best to support you, whatever the question is. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. And just for those on the call, 106 here at the moment, that number for the COVID-19 hotline is 207201. I'm guessing 01803, Steve.
Indeed, yes.
Okay, that's 7 days a week. Really interesting. The shielding and the work that's going on. The sense of community at the moment is fantastic. And this is really quite heartwarming, the fact that in this time of adversity, we're all in it together, but we're all actually looking to help each other. So frustratingly, not able to get your payments out. We're always waiting on a software patch, aren't we all? How many updates have we had this week, I guess? So thanks for that. There are lots of people in the queue. I know the on the unemployment side of things, the benefits office, they were saying how many thousands of people are in those calls. So we just got to get the staff in place to be able to deliver. So Alan, thank you, Steve. Come over to Alan Denby now for an update from TDA. I hope.
Good morning, everybody. So thanks very much for the invitation to speak this morning, Steve. It's great to be able to come on and just explain a little bit about what we've been doing. I think probably for most of us, we found the last couple of weeks have been just a tremendous assault on our professional and sort of personal senses. And what we've been trying to do from a TDA perspective is work with our colleagues in the council, but also across the business community. So working with the forum, working with the TBID and with Carolyn and with the chambers locally and regionally with the local enterprise partnership. And we've been trying to address that point that Tim made about identifying the intelligence and finding out what is happening on the ground with our businesses to make sure that we can get the grants out as quickly as possible, identify where those challenges are, raise awareness, as Steve Darling set out, raise awareness of the support that's out there, but also try and do some modelling of the impact that we might see locally. Tim Jones started off by reminding us that the government's local economies advisory panels red rated the Devon economy. And as Tim said, that does take into account not just the coronavirus, but Flybe, Appledore, some of the other challenges which we've seen locally. And what you might have seen in a press release that came out on Friday was that the Devon local authorities, we've set out a scenario of what might take place, and it could see as many as 123,000 jobs being lost across the county, around about 12% of our GBA, which would be around £2 billion. And we think that in a worst case scenario for Torbay, that loss of jobs could be around about 12,000 employees, which is about 25% of all of our employed jobs. We're particularly concerned at the underlying fragility, which we've spoken about before, for the Torbay economy compared with some of the other parts of the UK, might make our rebounding difficult. So we've been working with Steve and with Councillor Swithin Long, who's our portfolio holder, and with both Kevin and Anthony as our MPs to set out what we think we might need to be able to do to respond in the future. We think government's been pretty decisive in the support that it's set out, but we know locally that there are still some of our businesses which are falling between the gaps. Where we know of them, we're trying our best to support them and at least identify those cases through to government. I'll completely reiterate what Councillor Darling said, that if you haven't applied, if you think you're eligible for those grants and you haven't applied, please do get in touch and make that application. We're concerned about the supply chain and hospitality sector. For instance, we've identified quite a few food and drink manufacturing businesses where we've seen some businesses, Bays, I think probably most notably, not just because I've got an order with them, most notably maybe locally have adjusted, but there's been others as well. We think there's a real need as well for government to look at the self-employed package. We know that locally we have a great record of starting businesses, lots of sole traders, but not all of those are able to apply. So looking away from what's happening very locally, some of the things which we're looking to try and do with partners to try and ensure that there's enough resilience is we've been working with our partners in the LEP to signpost different businesses through to the Heart of the Southwest Growth Hub. That is probably the best source of complete support and advice which we'll find for Devon and Somerset for Torbay businesses. So that's on the Heart of the Southwest Growth Hub website. There is a specific COVID-19 guidance business page. Lots of that information is also replicated on the Torbay Council site. So certainly Torbay businesses, have a look at both of those. And if you are aware of people in your networks that might be looking for jobs, there's also on the Heart of the Southwest website, there is a virtual jobs fair, which is to try and to broker and match up people who might have recently lost their jobs and are looking for something else. And then, while it's difficult at the moment to think about the recovery phase of this because it's so much of a shock to us all, we do think it's incredibly important that we start to plan and we look to how we can recover and respond in the future. What we did with Plymouth and with Devon was to set out a number of ways in which we think government can support the county and support Torbay. We've looked for a flexible response fund, which would give us greater ability to offer grants to SMEs. We think there's a need still for some support for businesses with over £45 million turnover. There's a couple who are registered with Torbay, and that could have a big problem for us if they aren't able to sustain themselves in the future. Something around digital skills is certainly an issue, and I'm sure that Kate will speak about the importance of digital skills in the future economy when she speaks later on. Fisheries is really important for us, obviously, as well. It's a hugely important, very identifiable business in the sector for the Bay, Brixton especially. We think there needs to be something there which recognises that businesses in the fishing sector, they are self-employed, but they're not able to access quite the same levels of support as others. Tourism, I'm sure Carolyn will speak about what we're looking to do to respond there, but we do feel that with our partners across the whole of the Great South West, that the tourism zone opportunity which government's put forward is something that needs to be pushed forward more quickly, and especially quickly to get decisions on the High Street Fund for Payton and the town deal for Torquay. So that's a package of what could be £43 million worth of investment that would come forward to fundamentally change the town centres in both of the two towns. We think it's going to be incredibly important for us to find a way to show that confidence, reassure the investment partners, reassure the market, reassure the local community that what we're looking to be able to do is right, that we're able to get it funded, we're able to get our projects taken forward. So very much in the short term, let's make sure that we've got all the businesses who are eligible for those grants applying for them. Look to see where we can get support where we possibly can in terms of the job fair and the business support, and then really importantly, starting to plan and prepare for the future. And I'll leave it there, Steve.
That's great. So I just will let you know your popularity rating is good, because we started on 106, we've now got 109. So well done, you've talked it up a bit. So thank you for that. Yeah, change. And I really particularly picked up on what you said about recovery phase. Yeah, we can press pause for a couple of months. What happens afterwards? It always takes a while to stand a business up again. So we do need to look at the eligibility criteria and get those applications in, and look at how we can move forward and respond in the future. So we all know what the Torbay situation is. We all know what it's normally about. It's about tourism. So who better to ask to speak to us now than introduce Carolyn Custerson, the CEO of the ERBID company, the English Riviera Bid Company. Carolyn, are you there?
I'm here, and good morning, everybody. Like Tim, I'm a Sagittarian, always optimistic, and in my 35 years, I've never ever seen anything like we're all facing right now. It's hard some days to find some positivity, to be honest, but the one thing I am going to find positivity around is to immediately acknowledge our 1,500 tourism businesses who, in the wake of what can only be described as free fall without a parachute after the government closure announcements, are showing an amazing resilience. Now, by saying that, I don't mean that they are not really suffering. They are really suffering. We have a number of businesses at risk. There are going to be a lot of casualties. But the tourism sector is always resilient. And the reason it's always resilient is we're an industry that has had to endeavour and fight, and Tim Jones will record all this, both severe weather, the closing of the Dawlish line, foot and mouth, but never has there been anything as big as this. So what have we've been doing? I just wanted to highlight a few things. So I think we must all not forget that we're being particularly hard hit because we're a seasonal destination. There are a lot of businesses that are open all year, but overall we're still a seasonal destination. And when the closure notices were issued back in March, many businesses were at a very low cash situation. They'd come out of the winter having done refurbishments, etc., low levels of business. And then to be closed at that point, it couldn't have actually been a worse point for the Torbay tourism or any tourism sector to close. So that cash flow situation, has been worsened by requests for cancellation. And managing cancellations is in itself a massive task. And there's lots of different approaches to it. Some of the global operators aren't being at all helpful, particularly amongst the self-catering side of things. So understandably, customers are asking for cancellations and they want their money back. And that's worsening cash flow. Now, a lot of people are being persuaded to defer their booking, and businesses are offering extended credit facilities to do that. The government are encouraging us to introduce voucher schemes so that visitors don't take the cash but keep the money in the business to help them. And we are coming out with a cancellation policy to present to visitors so that they understand a little more about what's happening. But the cancellation situation is going to worsen because obviously cancellations for March and April had a relatively low value. If the government extends lockdown, which I'm personally expecting, then the cancellations for May and June have a much higher ticket price than earlier on. So, the cancellation value issue worsens, and the situation hasn't been helped by the fact that the insurance companies are not going to pay out for business interruption. Since COVID-19 was defined as a pandemic, the insurance companies are all pushing back, and I don't know any business as yet that has been successful in claiming for loss of business through business interruption insurance. So cash flow after the initial £10,000 or £25,000 grant against the increased demand for cancellations and cash refunds, I think presents us all with a very, very big challenge. Obviously, too, staffing issues. There's been a lot of businesses, because we are seasonal, a lot of our permanent staff that come back year after year weren't on the payroll on February the 28th. Because a lot of businesses that are closed in the winter don't actually start opening their doors till March. So that's one particular campaign that I really am lobbying the Treasury through Kevin Foster, because we need the furloughing scheme to bear in mind continuity of employment. And at the moment, those personnel that come back and work every year for a business, but work perhaps 10 months, not 12 months, they currently cannot be furloughed, and that's a serious, serious issue that we all need to campaign for. As a company, I've been focusing very much on communication, two kinds of communication, B2B with our 1,500 levy payers. We too have furloughed 2 staff. We face a £150,000 shortfall in levy collection, so we're now operating on 40% capacity to carry things on through. B2B lobbying, Kevin's been fantastic. We've got a great Southwest Regional DMO group, destination marketing organisations, which allows us to put more pressure on Whitehall, and we've got direct access, and I have regular phone calls with the head of tourism at DCMS. So it's been very helpful that we've been able to influence Whitehall in their thinking, and that's been needed, particularly around some of the management of some of the online travel agents and the closure of properties, which they were ignoring. We've worked very closely alongside Torbay Council, TDA, and I think from a business-to-business point of view, I feel we've covered that well, signposting to businesses where they can get any help that they are entitled to. Measuring impact, Alan mentioned this, and it's so important, and we did a survey last week, and Torbay tourism businesses responded as they always do, 178 replies overnight, just to start to give us a handle on exactly what damage this situation is causing us. And just as one indication, in March alone, we lost £20 million in visitor spend, and that's an off-peak month. So the visitor spend is obviously just not happening. We normally would have 4.7 million visitors for this year. That's what we would be expecting. So the impact and measuring the impact, as Alan has said, is vital, because then we can keep lobbying for government to get additional help. And like Tim said, being with Devon flagged as red, it's not great, but if it means we get extra help because of our fragility, then I think, you know, we should just push ahead and do whatever we can to get support for the economy and our businesses. Visitor communications, I'd just like to touch on that. That's been difficult. Because I don't know if some of you saw early on, Cornwall's stance was to tell visitors to stay away immediately after the government did the lockdown on all the tourism and hospitality businesses. We've played it soft and safe is the approach I would say, with our communications focusing around a global campaign called Dream Now, Visit Later. We've included a new English Riviera virtual reality channel so people can enjoy the Riviera, feeding the penguins and swimming with the penguins, etc. from home. My whole objective over the past 3 weeks has been about keeping the English Riviera naturally inspiring brand alive, but importantly that we're seen as a responsible destination. So for Easter, our messaging is much more direct. We know the pressure is on now with the NHS and admissions into hospital. So for 7 days from yesterday, our messaging on all of our digital channels to visitors, stay at home, please do not travel to the English Riviera, save lives, protect the NHS. Never in my 35 years did I ever think I'd have to write that sentence. Visitors are not welcome, basically, but not in so many words. But we do have to protect our community, we were starting to see some resistance from residents who, you know, were basically concerned that visitors to the area, visitors to holiday homes, etc., could be presenting an additional and unwelcome threat. So the visitor communications will change as I see necessary. As the minute we go past the peak, which all of us are just wanting to see, then the messaging will return to a much more proactive message. But it is very inappropriate right now to do any direct marketing. Regarding recovery and future planning, absolutely with Alan, you know, we need to be planning for this Southwest tourism zone. We need to be making sure that we get the ERBID 2 ballot across the line in the spring to secure another £3 million for promotion, because more than ever before, we're going to need to promote the English Riviera. But I am going to finish on a positive note. We will come back from this. We have an amazing destination, and at the end of all this, there will be the biggest pented up demand for staycations we've ever seen. And we are perfectly placed here in South Devon with a superb product, and we will pull back, but there are going to be some casualties on the way. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Carolyn. Yes, well, a really heartfelt and passionate response from Carolyn there. So, you know, looking at the positives, just picking up on the fact when we come out of this, there is going to be one hell of a party. So if Bays are listening, you better start brewing soon. So it is tough. I do remember when foot and mouth hit us, Dartmoor was shut, the parks were shut. Torbay had its best ever Easter, if I remember rightly, but we can't do that this time. So we are all in this together. Thank you for the Dream Now, Visit Later mantra, the virtual tours, the work that you are doing. And I really wish you all the best with the bid number 2, because this will be the most important one if we're ever going to emerge from all of this. Now, some people I know are having some connectivity issues, but we seem to be pretty stable at 109, so that is good. Turning sectors now, last month we talked about great investment in new hotels in the Bay from the Fragrance Group and Martin Rogers, looking at how many jobs were going to be created. I'm going to come to Laurence Frewin, Principal of South Devon College and Chief Exec there. How are we doing on the education sector and the apprenticeships front then, Laurence?
Morning, Steve. Morning, everybody. Good. Apprenticeships have been, not surprisingly, apprentices are just as vulnerable, if not more so than others. But if I can start and tell you a bit about what we've been doing and then come on to apprenticeships, because there have been a lot of questions about that, and also some of the things that we're looking to do for the future. I think the first clear message I want to give is that we're still here for our local community. We see ourselves very much as an important anchor institution. And our doors might be closed right now, but other than our most vulnerable learners, which we're still supporting, but we're very much open for business and here to support Torbay and South Devon, and that's not going to change. We've adapted very quickly to remote and working and virtual learning. We already had a really clear digital strategy in place, so we've accelerated that, and probably like a lot of people have done in 2 weeks what we were probably planning to do over about a year or 18 months. We've got a huge range of online learning. There's been a massive increase in demand for that, not surprisingly. And just to let everybody who's in the webinar know that there is a massive range of learning that's available for you, for your employees. And just to be really clear, even if you're furloughing employees, they are still able to carry on learning. That doesn't affect the furloughing arrangements. It's just the working element. There's a lot of courses that we've got online. There's more that we can make available. And many of these are subsidised, quite heavily subsidised, so that in many cases they're at no cost to the business or individuals. So there is an email address if people are interested, but I'll also give the email address because we really want to know about what next. Although we're all just dealing with what's happened and getting used to the new normal, what does that look like as an operation? We're starting to think about what will happen during the summer term for us, what will happen in the autumn, what do we need to do as a college to respond to make sure that we're ready for the employment market, whatever that looks like after this, after things start to get back to normal. So the email address is employers@southdevon.ac.uk, employers@southdevon.ac.uk. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, probably quicker, and tell us what you're looking for. Tell us what we're not doing that we need to be doing to help you more if we can. Some of the things that a lot of people are interested in, that we're seeing great demand in, around awareness of mental health training, digital inclusion, well-being, stress and stress management, huge, and that's not going to get easier over the coming months, but also some of the employability things that are going to be important. We're gearing up to start thinking about reskilling, retraining people, so that those who are recently unemployed in particular, we're ready to get them ready to go back into the business to support you. What we're doing at the moment, we continue to support our vulnerable learners, working closely with people like Torbay Council, the ESFA, Devon County Council and others, those with education, health and care plans, other learners who are at risk, vulnerable learners. Steve Darling mentioned the work that Torbay Council are doing, so we're an integral part of that with our school community as well. And we're also there when we need to provide facilities for children of critical workers if that's required. There's other things we've been doing. We've given away all of our PPE to local healthcare, to the NHS, to local GP practices, etc. We've donated a lot of food to Reform. Katie Cameron and the team doing amazing work, which we all know about across Torbay, feeding 800 meals a week there. We've created and digitally printed using our high-tech and digital centre facilities face shields for the NHS, and we've had a huge national uptake on that. Been sharing files there, and we've working with Devon County Council this week. We've opened our doors at our Centre for Health and Care Professionals on the hospital campus, starting to support training for the volunteers and new workforce that are joining the NHS following the calls over the last few weeks. So that went live yesterday. So we're doing everything we can to help businesses, to help our community. If we can do more to support you, please get in touch at the email address, employers@southdevon.ac.uk. We really want to hear from you. Obviously, we're working with the LEP, TDA, people like the Education Skills Funding Agency, and the Association of Colleges, talking to government directly at a national level to make sure that we're responding to what's needed and that we're ready for what's coming very shortly. So as a college, we've got a big part to play, as I've mentioned. We're thinking about what does the summer mean? How do we keep our young people engaged in learning? That's going to be critical. How do we make sure that when the autumn term comes, when August, September's here, that we're ready to quickly reskill large numbers of people? And what about those students who would have been leaving at 18, 19 years old? They're going to a very, very, very different employment marketplace, which is going to be recruiting probably recently unemployed and experienced workforce. So is there a place for them? So we're just thinking about what we can do to support them, whether it's extending their learning for a bit longer until the workplace is ready for them, or whether we need to give them employability skills, short, sharp training to get them ready to hit the ground running and get into the marketplace to support some of the things Carolyn is suggesting is going to happen. We're ready for that as well. And just finally on apprentices, they're very much affected. Some businesses have seen, not necessarily locally, but across the country, have seen apprentices as the first group of employees perhaps to furlough or to lay off. We're encouraging all businesses not to do that. Apprentices can be furloughed along with anybody else. And the other important bit, just to remind you, is you can carry on learning even if you're furloughed. And so apprentices, it's a great opportunity for those of you who've got apprentices, and if they are being laid off and furloughed, they can carry on doing their 20% off the job. So equivalent of a day a week, we can front load that essentially, keep them in learning over the current period where everything's locked down. So when we start to get back to some form of new normal and normality, those apprentices are ready to go into your business, to support you on the front line, to work all the time you need them, because they will have done their 20% off the job now. So it's a really good opportunity, and it's a great way to keep them ready to go, so that you can get going when you need to and start generating that much needed income. And then very finally, we're going to carry on running a series of webinars. Emily Tucker has got a plan with Steve and others for key topics. And again, let us know if there are things that you want to know about from us, and we'll make those topics for future webinars. So I'll leave it there, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for the audience for bearing with us today and our inaugural webinar. We do want to do some more of these, and we want to make sure that connectivity works for those lives. You want to tell us about how working from home is going to boost that?
Yeah, so thanks, Steve, and hello, everyone. Thanks for staying on the call as well to hear something about digital. And actually, there's been a bit of a theme throughout all of the talk so far, I think, around the digital piece. First, I just want to kind of give an update around Cosmic and what we are doing to support the local business community. On the day of lockdown, we released a remote working helpline and a toolkit, and those two things are still available to any businesses who want some one-to-one support on how to work from home, how to set up your business from home, but also how to maybe pivot your business model as well. I'll put the phone number and the toolkit, I'll send to Emily and ask her to send those out to you, so that do please use them and get in touch with us as we're going forward. We've also run about 40 workshops, 40 virtual workshops since the lockdown, to businesses, charities and larger organisations in the area. We focused on three key things: on remote working, on ways to pivot your business model, and on ways to reach your customers or new customers. We're recognizing that actually there is a little chink of good news here, that people are still spending, customers are still spending, they're just spending in very different ways. So one of the things we're really keen to support businesses on is thinking, how can you pivot this business model that you have now and make it effective for this digital world? So very simple ways of setting up and creating e-commerce sites, forms that people can just put in their orders and get deliveries, through to live streaming, ebooks, all of those kinds of things. And so we're running those workshops, and we'll speak to Torbay Business Forum and see if there is any interest in running those for you as well. So please keep in touch with that stuff. But in terms of actually remote working, we've all been thrown into this environment, and we've all been now working in it for some people up to 2 weeks, for 10 days. But there are some tips I just wanted to share with you, just to help you to think about ways in which you can work in this way. One of the things that we've recognised is actually around the technology that people have got. It's really important that all of us, and we make sure that all our staff are really comfortable using video conferencing. In the toolkit, we've put a big area in there around etiquette, around how to get on calls, around kind of some of the key technologies to have a go and play with. And one of the things I'd really encourage you to do is to train your staff to be familiar with GoToMeetings, with Skype, with Zoom, with Teams, with all of those, with Google Hangouts, and help them to become familiar so that they are not able just to participate in one, but actually they're able to lead customer conversations and chair meetings within them as well. Also, what I would encourage them to do is spend this time to really become familiar with Office 365 and with the suite around Teams, not just Teams, but Planner, OneNote, Forms, all of those pieces that can really help your team to bond and work really well together in this environment. It can create really good opportunities to collaborate and to be innovative as well. So there is a real opportunity there to build that piece up. I would also encourage businesses to be focused on well-being at this moment in time, and to use the digital environment and think about ways in which you can translate your business culture into that online environment for your staff. So thinking about ways in which you might, on a simple level, might book in well-being calls with staff. When you are running video conferencing team meetings with staff, think about the people that aren't speaking and the people that have their video off, and maybe check in with those guys and think about ways in which you could support them. Help staff to be able to work on their own at home. Some people aren't great at actually structuring their day. So use techniques like time boxing, like Pomodoro techniques, like using Planner for their to-do lists, and help them to structure their days in a better way. Think also about using models like 5 Ways to Wellbeing. It's a great model, it's been around for years, but actually think about how we could encourage our staff every day to be active, to give a little, to connect, to learn, and to take notice of things around them. And you might want to create your own toolkit for staff that will help them to think in that way, so that they are getting away from their computer, they're understanding the boundaries, they're learning, and they are in an environment that they feel comforted and supported within. I'd also encourage you to make sure that within, for each member of staff, that you understand every staff member's routine, what regular hours they're going to be working, whether they're split shift, whether they are working a standard 8-hour day, or how they're doing that. And also encourage people to take lunch breaks and use digital communication to encourage them to be right back, or I'm on a call, and encourage those sorts of things, so that there is a status and an understanding of what people are doing at that moment. Don't forget that this is the time when information security, GDPR, can falter. So think about ways in which you can encourage and maybe retrain your staff to be really extra careful at this moment. We are seeing an increased piece around scamming, phishing, but also around actually denial of service attacks and cross-site scripting within websites. So just be really careful around your own piece and your own reputation in that area. If you do see things that are suspicious, please do contact the police. Please contact their cybersecurity unit, because we need to really be aware of this stuff. Now that a lot of young people are at home, often what we start to see is what we call script kiddies that are starting to attack and hack some sites. So just be careful of that. Also, my last point is around DSE, and just be aware for your staff that they are working safely. Check for their display screen regulations, get them to do some checks, make sure you measure that stuff, because otherwise we could be in the future some issues around our staff and their health and not just their well-being. So in summary, I would say this is the opportunity, this is the burning platform for digital. And this is the time really where you can invest time and thought into pivoting your business model to make it fit for the digital world. We and South Devon College and TDA are here to help. So please do use us during this time, and we'd love to support you. So thank you, Steve.
For future events, we will we'd love to welcome you and use your encyclopedic knowledge of all things digital. Fantastic. So now, waiting quietly in the wings, I know we've got our one and only Jim Parker, our very own local hack, the guy that has launched a newspaper free to all in the midst of a crisis.
Lost Jim, unfortunately, so sorry about that, everyone. And Steve's also just dropped out. I guess a massive thank you for everybody that's tuned in today. Really appreciate it. And as we've already said, we will be, we will hopefully be carrying on this theme with future webinars. And as I've said, we'll get Jim involved as well on the next one. We did say that we were going to do some Q&A. We have had a question on the line. I'm just waiting for Steve to come back in. We do have a question for Steve Darling. Is Steve Darling still there? Steve Darling still on the line? Hi, Steve. Hello, are you all right?
Yes, yep, fine.
Hello. So we did have a question for you, Steve. It was around the travellers. So we had a question from Ronnie at Big Wave Marketing, and he's wondering what are we going to do during the Easter period to mitigate any travellers coming into Torbay, which we know historically they have done year on year.
For our staff, it'll be business as usual as far as quickly intervening and trying to discourage this. Clearly, the police do have additional powers, and it's a worthwhile issue that I will reinforce after this meeting. So yeah.
We now have Steve back, thankfully. So I'll pass back over to Steve.
Thanks, Em. I know people have been trying to silence me for years, and that definitely worked when the VPN dropped out. I was happily having a conversation with myself as usual, but without any audience feedback, I didn't know I'd gone. So I do want to catch up now as to find out where we are in the proceedings. I know we've run over. Are there any more questions, Emily, that we need to address, those you've picked up in my absence?
No, I don't think so, Steve. And obviously, as we've mentioned, any questions that we perhaps haven't been able to answer today, we will get back to you. So I think just conscious of time.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Oh, thank you so much. I just want to thank our sponsors today, Bishop Fleming, sponsors of the month, without whom, Tim and the team, without your sponsorship, we could not produce any of our events throughout the year. There is room to sponsor the forum still. We've got some exciting new opportunities, and we will promote you as best we can. Thanks to our panel of speakers for giving up your time today. It's a very trying and difficult situation to be in, but it's lovely to see you all and for your totally active involvement. There's been a great community here. Thanks to Angela, George, and Mike Franchi at IMS Marketing, and also to Emily, of course, for facilitating today, and to Laurence for letting us use the college's kit. I want to thank you as Torbay Business Forum participants. So I say now, stay safe, keep well, and we'll see you very, very soon. We'll be back. Thank you.